I think phrases like lesser of two evils and between a rock and a hard place, those kind of phrases come to mind. So I don't know if I'm able to answer the question of whether this is a good move. But the question is, of the options available, which is the least of the bad options. So in that sense, I think most of us will not be surprised, and we won't see it as being too negative if we end up in that place. I mean, I think that's a fair question, and I think it goes slightly broader than that as well. But to agree with you, from a technical and a kind of logical perspective, an increase in the VAT rate is probably more appropriate than an increase in the personal income tax rate. And I think from a perception insofar as how the lower income earners will perceive that, I do agree that this will appear to be far more distortive. And there's likely to be far more political resistance. So in that respect, you're probably right. There's likely to be far more political resistance in relation to a VAT increase, even though it probably, from a technical perspective, makes more sense. I think, in a word, probably NHI. In other words, the political fallout from the VAT rate increase will have to be measured by some kind of real tangible benefit to South Africans. And I think the next time we start talking seriously about how government programs, and NHI is probably at the top of the list, but how government programs will be rolled out and will need extra funding, I think that's when we will see an increase in the VAT rate to fund specific programs that have specific measurable or perceptual benefit to South Africans. Look, I mean, I think this is an ongoing battle. I think the issue regarding those kind of matters is more a matter of the culture around paying tax and avoidance techniques. I think in terms of the ability to generate extra revenue, I think there's not a lot there. Trusts is of particular concern to the state. They see that as an avoidance mechanism for mostly high net worth individuals, which maybe points to why high net worth individuals are being singled out as a specialist group that will be focused on by SARS. But I think for the way I see it, the focus there by the Davis Tax Committee is really about simplifying our tax regime and making it more fair and increasing tax morality as opposed to generating a huge additional amount in revenue. Well, I think maybe the discussion probably is broader than that, because it's just the general progressive or redistributive nature per se of tax is probably the issue that needs to be discussed there, because we can talk about it at our the normal income tax rate and the fact that it's progressive, that lower income earners actually pay less tax than higher income earners. It's part of that progressive making our society more inequality. So when it comes to wealth taxes, that concept is already established in our society and most Western societies. So I'm not entirely sure that is by itself an appropriate discussion just in the context of estate duty and estate planning and trusts. It is probably part of a broader discussion around inequality in our society. Well, that's a difficult question. My own view and my own expectation is that it will be that we will probably see a little bit of a slowdown in activity, not because of work rate or anything like that in the Davis Tax Committee, but I think that what they need to focus on right now is on gathering data, understanding our economy, understanding the inequalities, and understanding the tax system better than they have up until now. I know they've done a lot of work up until now, but a lot of their work has focused on specific aspects of the tax system as opposed to detailed understanding of the macro environment. Now, you may be aware that last year they really launched into that, and I think that is really where the focus should remain for the next while. Whether it's going to and then refocus on the specifics of the tax areas once they have that kind of perspective. So I think it's going to carry on for a while longer as they do that, and the evolution will need to keep pace with the deficit needs in our country. I'm not entirely sure that they are that different in terms of their focus or the intended focus on discipline and having a very measured approach. I think perhaps maybe ex-Minister Nene came across as having a slightly gentler approach, but I think he still had the same mindset. So I think what Minister Nene or ex-Minister Nene was doing was a continuation of what Pravin Gordhan had started started already, in my view. And I think Minister Gordon will simply continue on that trajectory. And I think he might have to reset some of his plans. But I don't think we're going to see a major change in focus. Yes and no. I think Minister Gordon was less successful than he would have wanted to be in terms of reining in expenditure, narrowing the fiscal deficit. So I think the only difference is that there'll be a greater resolve this time around in really chasing that same objective. I'm probably going to end up on the higher end of the scale, because this really is, I think we can do a lot wrong, but it really is one of the hardest budgets that we're faced with. I know people would have heard almost every year for the last 4 or 5 years, oh, this is the tough budget, this is a hard budget. But I think the reality is that it's getting progressively worse. So my view is that we're probably going to end up in a relatively high rating, something like 7 or 8, around 8 out of 10. Because, I say that purely in recognition of the fact that there are a million different moving parts that the minister will have to juggle, and I think he'll do a good job of juggling them. Just think it's pie in the sky right now. So I think, look, the current economic territory that we're in really defines where we are. I mean, if you see as just managing your own personal household, if you are in an environment where your salary is increasing and the cost of everything that you need to buy is increasing, then you are in that juggling act zone until things get better. And we are not immune to the global environment, which is why we are dependent on the environment that we're in will determine how much longer we stay in this area of juggling. And before we get to the area where we actually have excess money to spend, and we can start becoming more expansionary and more progressive.